Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Briefing Hub. I am your host, JB. Glad to be with you again. Today, we're joined by Jeff Mariola, Chief Development Officer at Mariola Unlimited, executive coach, speaker, former CEO, 25 years of leadership experience across global organizations, startups, advisory boards. If I go on much longer, that's the whole show. So why don't we say hi to Jeff? Jeff, thanks for being with us today.
Happy to be here. Thank you for asking me.
It's a delight. And that is a pretty extensive resume, pretty stout across all those things. So I want to dive into some aspects of it that you can bring to the audience, I hope. Let's start with career and leadership, if that's okay with you. Is that okay with you?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Great. So as I mentioned, pretty diverse career, pretty robust as well. So large corporations, startups, very different demands, very different ideas, a consulting practice, different organizational skills, different relationship to clients. On that journey for you, what were some of the key moments that shaped how you think about what leadership is?
Let's go back to kind of the beginning for me.
Sure.
Was I had worked in sales in my 20s as just an independent salesperson, insurance, and very proudly spent 2 years in the Kirby vacuum cleaner business. But that's a whole other podcast there. It's really worth doing.
Okay.
But I answered an ad when I was about 28, 29 years old, and it was for a company out of Britain called Rentokil Initial.
Okay.
And it's a very large company, but they were just new to the United States, and they were looking to acquire kind of a buy and build model in the commercial pest control space. They felt, and rightfully so, that potentially this was going to be a big market for them. They were the world's largest commercial pest control company at that time, but very small in the U.S.
Okay.
And you mentioned shaped, and just what developed was the CEO was a real legendary figure. His name is Clive Thompson. Today he'd be called Sir Clive Thompson.
Oh.
He was voted Great Britain's top CEO numerous years, Europe's top leader, and I was hired in a branch in Akron, Ohio, 1985. I'm branch manager of 6 of us. So, it's one of those things you do a little bit of everything. You sell, you service, but Sir Clive Thompson came to visit. He came to my office. The reason he came was because they'd acquired a pretty large company in Cleveland. But that was a pivotal moment for me. Why? Because he came down to my office in Akron, Ohio, and spent a half a day with me. He spent a half a day, because I knew very little about P&L management and so forth, and walked me through the financials. More importantly, talked to me about leadership, talked to me about what made a successful manager at Rentokil Initial. And some of the advice that he gave me that day stays with me and is a big part of how I ended up becoming a leader and a manager. And just a couple things about him. One, he made certain that I understood in our kind of business that our men and women that work for us, they're out on other people's premises doing what they do. So we don't get to see them a whole lot. And that led to a discussion about you just have to earn their trust, you have to gain their trust, and you have to trust them. And then he even mentioned at that time it was a fairly male business. And it was get to know the spouse, get to know the families of the people that are working for you. And those things just stayed with me. And to think that he spent a half a day with me in my little business, and he's running a global company. And then if I go further out, so in 1995, I spent 28 years at Rentokil. In 95, so 10 years later, I become the president of the North American Pest Control Division. And one of the things that he did that helped shape me, we had to go to the UK every 3 months. At first, I thought that was a little crazy. My little business in the US, I had to go to the UK, to the head office, stand up for 3 to 5 hours and present to the executive team my business. But I learned so much from that experience. A couple things. One, you have to get outside your business occasionally. And just the fact that I had to prepare myself, because the rigor of those reviews were pretty intense. So you had to know every variance in your P&L and so forth and understand your forecast. But I asked him one time, it's a big expense to fly me and my CFO over here every 3 months. Why do you do that? Why just couldn't we call or maybe do it twice a year or once a year? And he said, I want to look you in the eye. I want to look you in the eye as you're across that board table. And I want to know that you really believe in what you're sharing with me and that you're passionate about achieving those goals and the targets. And again, that was something that I just took with me and carried with me for the rest of my career.
Well, that's
I had a couple other ones if we had time. I'll tell you another one was.
Sure.
I was very lucky. I was very fortunate that General Electric, we leased all my vehicles from them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And Jack Welch was just so ahead of his time that he knew that if he was going to get his, at that time he was on a improvement plan under the green belting and so forth, that if GE was going to become that good, they needed their customers to improve their skills. So he allowed owners to go out to Crotonville, their learning and development center. And I sat through a number of what they called Session C courses, which is where I learned about talent management. And that has really shaped the work I'm even doing today. He spent 60% of his time working on developing the next generation of GE leaders. So those were some real pivotal moments for me.
Yeah, those are big pivotal ones. And it's a reminder too, it's said, it's sort of cliche, but like your first leader, your first boss has such a profound impact on the course of your career, on the course of how you treat work and what you think about work. It's phenomenal to hear what you did. So I would want to follow up on that with the Jack Welch thing as well. Was the move then for you from obviously operational and leadership yourself, was the move into executive coaching and advisory like a natural evolution for you? Or
well, it was.
At what point did you were you like, that's it, this is what I'm doing now?
So that point came after I left Rentokil, and there was another learning there too. I was made redundant. My division, from another CEO, Andy Ransom, who was another brilliant CEO at Rentokil. It was a very good strategic decision on their part. My division, there were 5 large divisions at Rentokil Initial, but the biggest was Pest. And at that time, I was running our Ambius division, which is interior landscape. It was global. I was working over in the UK at that time, but it was relatively small. I think we were doing about 400 million. The pest control business was billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So they decided to roll my division into the commercial pest control business. And that made my position redundant. So I understood that. I would have done the exact same thing. You have to look at where you're going to put your assets. And so that led me to my CEO network. There was an entrepreneurial owner in that group, and he had asked me, he was starting up a second accounting and finance staffing company. And he had asked me to join him to build it out so we could sell it to private equity. And that was a whole new learning experience for me, working in a small company. We were 10 million when we started, and building that out to over 3 years to 35 million and selling it. So
wow.
I mentioned that because you said about what was the transition to the coaching advisory services. I knew in my heart of hearts at some point I was going to close that CEO chapter. And so like all of us, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. My strength as a leader over the years was developing talent. A lot of that came from what I picked up at General Electric, but I was good at developing talent. The thing that I am most proud of, Jeremy, and when you get older, legacy matters, is over 20 of my direct reports are now CEOs or presidents in their own business. Wow. That's something that I've learned to do, and it just became a natural extension when I closed the CEO chapter and I get so much meaning from doing that work and working with young individuals of all age, but primarily middle managers, developing them, and then working one-on-one with more of the executive suite. Sure.
It's funny. Big sports fan. So when I hear you discuss it like that, they talk about coaching trees of success in the NFL specifically. And it sounds like the Mariola coaching tree has produced some champions out there. So well done on that. It also, the way you describe it too, it's not an analytics or an operations thing. It is partially, but it's very much a culture thing. It's a thing that you develop in yourself and that you develop around you. And as the saying goes, culture eats strategy for breakfast. What are the within that? There's all kinds of traps everywhere, right? For everybody, just mistakes that can be made. What do you see most commonly in those mistakes trying to get the culture right?
The most common that I see in business, and a lot, is that people believe, CEOs or executive teams believe, that in order to move and change the culture, they start with behavior. So if we start doing these things, that will end up in the desired results, the outcomes. And what they're really missing. So when I look at the companies that have impressed me and what we always strived in our businesses, it begins with a very clear vision. That vision of where we're going, whether it's 3 years or whether it's 5 years. And here's why that matters, is that it's a visceral connection. It's emotional connection that your colleagues make. Because in that vision is where my career path is. In the vision of the company is where and how I'm going to provide for my family. That's a very emotional connection. So that's the first step. I happen to think that we find our purpose in life in the vision of the companies that we're working for when it comes to work. And then underneath that, or next to that, is a very compelling mission. Again, emotional connection. The mission is what gets me up in the morning. The mission is what drives me to want to climb that mountain. But they need to be crystal clear, need to be communicated. And then lastly, underneath that sits the core values, which are non-negotiable. And there should be accountability to any violation of those. So if you have a crystal clear vision, you have a meaningful purpose on where we're going, the mission, and then values that sit underneath. Companies are getting better at that. But I'm not talking about signs on the wall. This isn't, an emotional connection your team's making. But what they're missing, and I read something recently from Brene Brown, only 11% of companies tie their behaviors back to the values. That's the make or break. That's how the behaviors now become the logical, rational tasks that I do every single day that align towards the vision and the mission. That's a powerful piece, and that's usually missing. That's usually missing in most businesses.
Great, and Brené's work is pretty well known at this point about what that's about. And the why of things underlying whys just really does drive so much of our behavior, and then our business is a behavior as well. Within that, though, so the businesses have a slightly different. Our personal whys are very important. They should get us out of bed in the morning, take care of our needs and our families, however that looks for you. In the business, though, scale is a goal, and culture sits at that. If culture is at foundational level, what do you see in the terms of the teams that can scale? What differentiates the teams that can scale successfully, and I guess bring that culture with them, versus the ones that don't?
So culturally, if you look at from a performance standpoint, and let's judge performance based on growth, growth in profitability, growth in revenues, and also high engagement. So if you look at the research of the highest performing companies, the ones that are operating with that high level of growth, and that ties back to the scalability, I think you're going to see something. You're going to see that probably the lowest performing cultures are the ones, and they still exist, where it's a command and control management style. I tell my team what to do, and they need to do it. So there's very little autonomy. There's very little collaboration, and they still exist. But where I see the biggest gap is they'll move from command to control, but they'll move to where I now am putting in my group some very talented individuals, high-performing individuals.
Sure.
And they're operating individually extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
That's not enough. It's very easy because you're starting to get success and you will get growth. But what happens is it's a very individual culture, meaning you'll create silos.
Mm-hmm.
So you won't have sales working well with operations and finance and so forth. You have a team of very high performing individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to scale, you got to cross another line. The companies that are performing at that extremely high level work interdependently.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, we don't have as much time, but you want a great example of that. Look at Microsoft.
Okay.
Microsoft is a case study of a company that under Ballmer's tenure from 2000 to 2012 really struggled. The market capitalization went from 300 billion to 330. And culturally, that place was all high performing individuals, but it was competitive. They were envious. It was just not a very good culture for growth. And then they brought Satya Nadella in, and he turned it completely around. He showed compassion. He showed vulnerability. He brought in growth mindset. It didn't have to be invented at Microsoft. In his first 3 years, he doubled the market capitalization. He's CEO today. It's a $3 trillion business. Why? He'll tell you why. Culturally, they have figured it out. Emotional intelligence matters there. Collaboration matters there. That's, to me, just one of the great examples of how to scale a business.
Absolutely. Those numbers are crystal clear, too. And it's about that concept where profit, growth, scale are all definitely markers for success, but engagement is that real underlying foundational stuff that can amplify and multiply everything that's going on, which leads me into, that's a very human thing, right? Those engagements, why we do a thing, mission, purpose. AI is everywhere right now. It's a big part of technology. It's in every conversation. I don't know if you can go anywhere these days without somebody saying AI is important to something. Everything. Maybe I'm an avatar right now. I don't know. They fixed my voice with AI. I don't know who's doing post on this one. From your perspective, where you sit and the trajectory you've had and over the course of your career, what are you seeing out there for the actual ways in which AI is effective and helpful right now?
I see a number of ways. Here's an observation, and I get this from the groups. I have my Agora group is a group of executives, and they range all different. There's a demographic curiosity about it to me. What I think it has the opportunity, and I've seen this, to there's four in a lot of companies I work with. There's 4 generations in the workplace. And I've seen where AI, on a very practical level, has brought more engagement. There's always talk about a lot of the friction points between baby boomers and Gen Z and Gen Y and so forth. But the companies that are understanding that particularly their younger colleagues working there who really understand the technology a bit more, if you can get them collaborating and working in unison, and I've seen that in a few of my clients, I thought they looked at it generationally and said, okay, how can we cross teach this? And it's just brought a whole level of respect up for some of these younger generations, which are, the perception is always that there's something wrong there. It's not. It's been going on for 100 years. There's always a generation coming in.
Totally.
So that's just one way. So I'll just share with you what I think is working real well. It's not the technology, it's technology. It's brilliant. It is every single day I'm amazed. I use a lot of my own practice. But I think in the workplace, a lot of CEOs believe that they're just going to bring it in and they're going to bucket that to my accounts payable, or we're going to put that into my finance.
Right.
And they're not sitting down with the men and the women that are going to have to use the end result of that. They're not collaborating. So there's so much fear about just the basic fear of, is this going to eliminate my position?
Sure.
It should augment it, but it should allow you to work at even higher levels on more important things. It should be automating and doing the things that it does 100 times better than you've been doing. but that involves me, who's the category expert in my department, to work with it, with help, consulting, and I just don't see enough of that. I see it being given to a manager and say, figure this out.
That leads into, I wanted to ask a little bit about like where it's being overestimated, where it's being misunderstood, and where in daily strategy, maybe daily decision-making, it's going well. Do you see those two poles? You sort of alluded to them already.
There's a couple, I'll give you good examples generationally. I have one CEO who's 34 years old. Okay. Every decision he makes, if he has a new SOP or he's beginning an onboarding program, he starts with AI. So he's completely immersed in it.
Okay.
And then I have a CEO who's my age, curious enough, understanding enough of the impact of this. He's made sure that his management team is really well versed, meaning they're getting outside support and learning, taking classes to understand AI.
Okay.
So he doesn't have to try to do it himself. And went as far as when they did their offsite strategy last year, each manager had to utilize AI tools that they had learned and worked with to put the strategy together.
Awesome.
And that's why I think generationally that's helpful. That's very helpful.
Without a doubt. Thanks for those examples too. It helps point to where immersion can be and how to employ it strategically as opposed to reactionarily, which of course, if it's just reactional, it's never a good strategy. If it's just reacting to what's out there. Yes. Do you think AI, and we also throw AI around as the largest fishing net we've ever used. It covers everything that's automated, which is a little challenging. But as we understand it in its current form, do you think it'll change leadership itself or how leaders operate, or both?
It should allow leaders to operate at higher levels because they're able. It can augment some of the things you do as a leader. Well, this is highly subjective, sure. But I don't. If you think about what leadership is, when I look at where I spend my time when I was running my business, about 25% of my time was managing the business. That's working on the things that are urgent, that are important, and that's why we're in business. But I should be spending upwards of 65% of my time doing what? Developing the talent that's inside my organization.
Right.
I should be out and about in the business, getting to know my teams and speak to them and understand their issues and so forth. That's not an AI component. AI is not going to replace emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence is something that leadership is built upon. You look at statistically, career success, 60-70% of it is tied to your emotional intelligence. AI can help give me guidance and make me much more strategic in my thinking. It can't have the conversation with a client. It can't have the conversation with you and I about your career path. Right. It can't be the fierce conversation about performance or lack of performance. So from a leadership perspective, the changes will just allow me to spend more time on the things that matter most, which is generally your team members, developing your business and working with your clients.
Yeah. That's always, people ask me about that, and I'm with you on that. I hear it, and it support in every way, which is like, I think we should automate those things which can be automated, that are routine, that are tasks, that are good for robots. Let's give it to the robots.
I have another client, he's a landscaper. So they've automated, that AIs come in and now on commercial mowing, there's no person sitting on a tractor.
Yeah.
It's been AI programmed and the batteries are good enough to allow that thing to run for a day. Well, that doesn't mean that supervisor or that person that was on that mower is out of a role. He or she is in a more impactful role, doing something that's adding more value to the business. Maybe it's customer facing, or maybe it's managing a crew and a team. It's not going to eliminate, I believe, as much as people are predicting. but it's repurposing people to focus on the things that the human condition can deal with.
That's we can all share the intelligence. Let's use the human for the human and the
Yes.
artificial for the artificial. Moving on, man, we could spend hours. So I just want to keep us moving forward. You mentioned the Agora Forum before. It's a private space that you developed for senior leaders. How did you? I guess what was the inspiration for that founding? Was
The inspiration was for
Yeah.
I spent 20 years in Vistage, which is a CEO network. I think it's one of the largest CEO networks in the world. They had 8,000 members.
Hmm.
In Chicago alone, when I was in Chicago, there was 32 CEO groups. I was in one of them. And that experience was so rich. You're in there with 15 other CEOs, different industries for the most part. And we met every day, or not every day, we met one day a month. And when I moved to Sarasota, I just didn't believe I needed to join a group. I was out on my own. I didn't have a business anymore,
Right.
Outside of just my own practice.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to maintain what I got so much value from. So I started my own, which is virtual. It's 3 hours a month.
Okay.
The difference, what I found, one of the differentiators is I'm not confined to a geography. Because in Chicago, you got to be local because you drive there. And it's very time consuming. I mean, to drive there, spend a day and drive back, great experience though. My business experience was wonderful. So here we meet for 3 hours, but I can pull from all over the world. So it doesn't matter where you're at. If you can make the time, you'll be part of the group. And I can also, it's not just CEOs, it's just C-suite individuals. So we get much more, depth in the conversations.
Do you work on particular leadership gaps that you see, or is it conversations, or what are the drivers within that group? I'm curious.
Generally, there's over 3 hours, there's a good hour, maybe an hour and a half on a subject. So I'll either bring in a guest speaker, some category expert. Oftentimes I'll do a workshop. And then the rest of the time is spent on issues and opportunity resolutions. We have a process that we go through. And we get a lot of great feedback from that because you're working on your own issues in your business. And through clarifying questions, we often find out what the real problem is. And then the group meeting every month, the levels of accountability, when you come back, you're not going to want to come back and share with the group. You haven't at least taken action on it. So highly, highly accountable.
Oh, that's great. That sounds really productive. And virtual ability to meet has been definitely one of the big, avoid the commute. Let's get together, let's get to work, and then go right back to, your living room, wherever you may be. So we mentioned strategy earlier in that culture eats strategy for breakfast. The definition of strategy, I think, is one of the things that maybe some leaders or some businesses struggle with. Like what does when people throw it around, we've got a strategy, getting up and, having a breakfast is a strategy, but it's not going to get you far. So what's a real business strategy look like? And when it's in an organization and they say, we have our strategy locked in, who's impacted by that? Who's actually locked in?
Well, everybody ultimately should be, because it's your blueprint. Isn't it in your playbook?
It should be.
So I'll just share with you where I see it go wrong.
Okay.
And I was part of a lot. I mean, so much of what I've learned over the years, I've had to unlearn. But I particularly early days in Rentokil, Sir Clive must have had a 30-page top down. He gave us a number. And that's it. We had to work to it.
Wow.
So they were very top down.
Sure.
And I still see that. My ideal way of strategy is you start with the CEO, maybe the CFO, to get a sense of what things might look like 3 years from now. And then if there's any new business lines that they're looking to move into, or where the business is going to go over 3 years.
Okay.
And then typically I'd want with them to do a real good SWOT analysis, to take a good look at where the business is. And then lastly, a post-mortem. So this is top of mind because we just came back from a weekend with a group up in Chicago. And So I spent a day with the co-CEOs, and we also did a really good post-mortem, because unfortunately, too many businesses, you go back and just look at the last year, what worked, what didn't, around people, processes, and systems, and what didn't work. It's more important, right, I think, to look at what didn't work, because you don't want to repeat those again. You can't just add new things, initiatives. You'll overwhelm your teams. So we did that for a day, but then where it became useful was the next 2 days, bringing a cross-functional group. There were 9 from their company, from HR to all the different, you want operations, you want really good coverage. And so we just shared the high level of where it was going. And then we got into some really good discussions about how are we going to get there? How does this impact your division?
Oh, wow.
And then they had a couple new business lines they were thinking of going into. And my only pushback was, I want you to walk into this next 2 days non-judgmental. You have an idea, but it's not a plan. And it won't work unless the individuals that are coming into that room agree and roll and want to execute. And interestingly enough, 2 of the ideas that were on the first day just got put aside. It was too much. The organization, it was just going to be too much for them to absorb in 1 year. But then those teams worked independently. I put the CEOs out of the room, and then I facilitated work with the cross-functional group. And so what we came back with, I thought, was a very healthy plan forward. We identified the ideal client profiles that we wanted to go after to get growth, what the value propositions were, making sure that they're lined up, and then what are the channels, how we're going to go to market. And then they came back in the room, and then we just moved the strategy a little bit further from there. I think when it's that fluid and it's discussed and it's not stamped that day, the outcome of that meeting was each manager there had to take away at least 2 objectives and key result areas, two OKRs they could tie back over the next 6 months that aligned to the discussion. They didn't have to create them there. It was asking too much.
Right.
So we're regrouping on Friday to go through the OKRs to see if they all roll up to align with the strategy. I think that gets you started. And then those managers have to take that to their teams all the way down to the most customer-facing colleague that they have in the business.
That's a great insight into the workings of how a strategy can come to life. And you have an idea, not a plan, is a quote might put on a cross stitch somewhere. That's an important, powerful statement right there. I think a lot of people think their ideas are executable when there's no plan to go with them. That creates some gaps, especially without stakeholders, which you also employed. Within this is a great conversation about that. What are you seeing in the conversations among executives behind closed doors in those environments or other environments today, in terms of the challenges, whether it's around technology or culture or strategy, or the successes around those categories as well? What's going on back there?
Well, at the CEO level, one of the common themes is a little bit of fear, the unknown of when it comes, and you mentioned it earlier, AI. It's sitting in the back of a lot of their minds about what impact is this going to have on the future of their business, particularly the ones that are highly compassionate about their business, that know their individuals and so forth. And, this fear that it's going to, 5 years from now, so many roles may be eliminated. So that's very real. That's very real. And I think other people, if you start doing executive coaching with CEOs, and I know this myself, at times, as wonderful as it looks to be a CEO and all that comes with that, there's a tremendous amount of loneliness. You're in some organizations, it's just hard to get the truth. And, a lot of people tell you what you want to hear. Now, the great leaders can break through that. But there's nowhere else to go for a CEO. That's why engaging in groups like Vistage or any group outside your core business, I think, is essential to keeping you connected to other people that are at that level. But I think most of the discussions around AI, people will want to say what's happening politically and then the economy, and that just doesn't come into play. I mean, that's just part of pivoting and adjusting. because no one has a crystal ball there. But they're looking more at the longer term impacts of things like AI will have on their culture.
Sure.
For the same reason, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was COVID and hybrid, and
Sure.
a lot of that has kind of moved away, thank goodness. And they're just focusing on things that are going to make a very significant difference. I mean, AI is, in my little practice, it's just made so much of a difference in the last year.
It's a powerful technology, however you talk about it, any automation at that level, and the LLMs that are out there that are most consumer facing are a massive game changer for so many people. And one of my favorite quotes, which has been accurate for the last 35 years, is we are currently at the slowest rate of innovation that we will be at.
Yeah.
And I think that, to your point about CEOs who have,
How true is that? Yeah, I love the way you said that. Yes.
Yeah, it's been true. It's been right every time, and I think I love getting your insights on that, to hear that CEOs have apprehension about where they are. And for me, some of the people that I talk to in the world, part of it is the pace. Once machine learning accelerates again, we're really beyond human rate of change. Like it's a powerful thing that we all have to sort of contend with.
Exactly right. How does my team, how do I stay pace with it? It's so much further ahead right now. It's just, how do I catch up, and how do I adapt to that?
Yeah, it's a wild ride. Great tools as always, tools that can be used. So as we wrap things up here, you mentioned it, and I kind of want to get some specifics if I could. You said you had to unlearn some things about leadership. What are some of the top items or some of the most profound things you had to unlearn about leadership?
Well, I share this a lot with the groups that I work with. I think the reason that I was able to be successful over a pretty long period of time as a CEO is a commitment to learning. Nobody can outwork you. And I don't mean hours. I'm talking about putting effort in learning. You can have all the talent in the world, but effort is twice as important as talent. And I look at what's happening today, and I mean, it energizes me. The rate of learning, the challenge becomes, how do I discern amongst so many resources where to focus my eye on the one or two things that are going to make the biggest impact? But for me, I'll go back to a breakthrough moment for me in my thinking and my change in management was really around 2000. And if you match that up to economic theory, really going into the 90s, it was all rational theory, wasn't it? Is that we're rational economic beings. We make decisions based on rational logic decisions. And then along comes people like David Conahan. And the guy wins the Nobel Prize for economics in 2004, and he's a psychiatrist.
Yep.
You take the psychology movement, the positive psychology movement, Seligman and all of them, studying successful people, and now we're starting to get information about how people make decisions. And that whole shift of Conahan's prospect theory and understanding how really irrational we are and how many biases that we carry.
Yeah.
It just changed the way I looked at just two areas of the business, the two vital areas of the business, sales and marketing. Here we are going to market very logically and rationally. We're selling and it's just, we're missing out on business. We're missing out on opportunities. And that was a complete shift, and had to reinvent all of our learning and development systems. The sales, most of the sales training and development I got was in the 80s and 90s, and it was pretty good. But it just doesn't work as well today because it's too rational and logic, and human beings don't make decisions that way. So that was great learning for me. And then it just continues. It continues. There's so much great work done. Look at Thaler's work on choice architect, which is, nudging.
Yeah.
That's a definition of management. He couldn't call the book, what was the term he used? Libertarian. Parental libertarian. He called the book that, he wouldn't sell one.
Parental libertarianism. Yes.
But if you think about it, isn't that what a great leader does?
Yes.
You give freedom and autonomy. You give choice, remember, I have expertise in this. So the choices that you're going to make hopefully are made from a perspective of being the right choice.
Yeah.
But so I had to unlearn quite a bit that I learned in the 80s and 90s, probably more than you really want to know.
No, that was great and so specific. And the behavioral economics change. It's funny that you said it like categorically, your timing for your career to move, that you aligned with that, and it meant so much to you. And I was going to ask specifically within that what it was, because I think, learning is fantastic. And then you alluded to the idea that you need to sort of know where to put your eyes. Was it the behavioral economics? Was that just natural, or were there other things you were trying to learn that sort of got you in that path? Like, what would it be? What would you want people to be focused on learning right now?
Well, I think that's a good place to start. Because there's certain parts of the business that haven't really kept up with that. I mean, the big companies, yes, they figured it out. I mean, they had to. They had the resources. So from a marketing perspective, loss aversion is baked into everything. Okay? But so when I do, some of the other work I do is around sales mastery in working with sales teams.
Okay.
And they're still stuck in a paradigm that's 20 years old because most of the great courses were written then. They're not necessarily relevant today. So if I'm talking to a sales manager, the first 3 books I tell them to read are not sales books. You need to read Robert Cialdini's 6 Influences, the Psychology of Influence and Persuasion. Okay. And that was 1985. And that book it understands, it's not even written for sales, but it understands the whole sales process, the whole sequence. And then I would say reading Fast and Slow, Conaham's book. Yeah. And then I'd recommend that they read Nudge. And then there's just a lot of work. And then listen to Hidden Brain, because you're going to get some of the best podcasts on how human beings really do make decisions and think.
Hidden Brain's a great one.
Just not enough people, I think, focusing on that.
It's, it's funny because they do get, you get trapped. I don't know, trap's not quite a word, but attention gets put on the spreadsheets and on the profit margins and on the numbers. And underneath those numbers, every one that gets moved is moved by a person, even if it's automated. There's an element of it that's human. And in the consumer side of it, as you said, the idea of a rational marketplace is long gone.
I'm sure you got your own stories. I got mine.
I have my own decision making when I can see it happening.
We purchase things very emotionally. It's just later on we justify them with.
Oh man, storytelling is always key. Always a key. And finally, as we wrap up this story, and thanks so much for spending time with us. With this moment we're in right now, with the balance of technology, with the balance of performance, with profit margins, with the human side of culture, the uncertainty of where we're at. If someone said, Jeff, I'd love, we're in the elevator. I need you. We got a few floors. I need your advice. How do I do this? What do I do? What do you say?
I'd spend making sure that you are spending significant time one-on-one with your top performers in your business. People that you identified as not just high performing, but high potential. If you spend your time there as a leader, developing them, that's how you scale organizations. Because the risk of not spending that time and spending your time on spreadsheets, this is where AI can do a lot of those things.
Yep.
AI can't sit one-on-one, you and I, having a very fierce conversation, whether it's a positive one or a corrective one, that is going to set you and us on a path of success, because that's what leaders do. Jeremy, this has happened to you. Someone saw more in you than you saw in yourself and found a way for you to pull that out of yourself and just elevate, transform. That's what leaders do. That's where they need to be spending their time. Because if I'm not spending that time with you and you're one of those high performers and high potentials, you're gone. You 12 months, if you're not in a new role within 12 or 18 months, you're going to be gone. So that to me is always going to be priority number one is that, and it happens in a one-on-one, not a team meeting. It happens in you and I sitting down and having real conversations.
Human to human.
Yes. Yes.
So good. That was a great elevator ride. Thank you so much. I feel inspired. I feel like it's been a fantastic conversation. I feel like we've covered a lot. Is there anything you feel? Is there any last thoughts?
No,
I feel good.
I love talking culture and AI. I'm a learner. I'm a student. I got a long way to go.
Me too. I think we're all in that boat as far as, unless we're coding it ourselves. But I want to thank you so much, Jeff, for taking time out of your day.
No, my pleasure. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation here.
Real pleasure. Jeff Mariola, everybody. So you can, I'm sure, find him with a Google search, and AI will tell you all about him. And then you can get his services there and learn all about leadership from Jeff. I want to thank you for being with the Briefing Hub. We'll see you next time.